Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us down to give our opinions on things. I'm Commodore at Christchurch Sailing Club, and I was co-opted onto the PCBA to give advice on navigation and sailing dangers caused by NAVITUS, as there are quite a lot. So MTBL have created, as you might see from this little plan that's around you, what you might call the NAVITUS Crossroads. I call it NAVITUS Crossroads. What a ridiculous place to put a wind farm. The Marine and Coast Guard Agency, that's the MCA as it's known, do have guidelines that shipping routes should not run adjacent to wind farms. And they recommend that there should be a 2.5 mile nautical miles separation zone between them. And instead, we have the Poole Cherbourg route running right alongside the western coast of the proposed site, and the guided path into the Needles Channel and out of the Needles Channel is on the northwestern coast. And so they're pushing traffic into very much corners, and of course there's recreational traffic and fishing traffic and coastal tankers moving around there all the time. And so the positioning of it is very, very wrong. Of course, this is a very big, number 2 on your list, this is a busy area for commercial and recreational boats. The Royal Yachting Association emphasised the importance of the area to the developer in 2010, but they ignored that, as they ignored the Marine and Coast Guard Agency advice. The Energy and Climate Change did a report acknowledging that the 12-mile area around the British Isles is particularly busy for recreational craft, and an important one too, because recreational tourism, as they call it, represents £3.7 billion to our economy, and probably on the south coast we take at least a third of that. And so the south, there again, we don't want to, it's not destroying it, but it's not encouraging it, because it's an industry that is rising and not declining. Another reason, as it is a busy area for, probably one of the most busy areas for recreational sailing in the country, because you've got boats coming from all over the Solent area and from Christchurch and Poole, and it is the cross-channel route really for most cruising boats and racing boats around the country. So they all congregate in there. And this is number 3 now, degradation to the radio. Well, as you might know, VHF radio is the use for safety boats, safeties on boats. Now, if you go between turbines, which are as tall as nearly every skyscraper in London, except for the, what's it called, the tall one? The Shah. The Shah. You can imagine that the radios aren't going to work very well, and anybody that does have a problem won't be heard, and so it's very concerning for safety. Of course, you have to appreciate the size of these wind turbines too. Apart from being nearly as tall as the Shah, the area that's covered by the diameter of the blades is 5 acres. Now, I don't know if you know what 5 acres looks like. Maybe you're not agricultural people, but if I said it's 4.5 times the size of a football pitch, that gives you the idea of the sweep of one turbine, and they're very big things out there. Of course, number 4, we're talking about the degradation to radar. Now, this is more serious really than the radio, because once a ship becomes within 1.5 nautical miles of the wind farm, radar becomes very distorted because of it causes big distortions in side lobes, and any big shadows on the screen mask any small targets that might be in the way. And so it's very worrying really. And of course, nobody will be able to find any yacht or recreational boat or fishing boat within the wind farm, because the signal will be just too distorted. So it's a serious consequence. Now these, with the radio and the radar, the Marine and Coast Guard Agency and the RNLI did trials on the North Hoyle Wind Farm, which is north of North Wales, not that far off the coast, you can see it. And they have 30 wind turbines there, and a lot smaller. And the trials there said that there were serious concerns of finding casualty vessels in the wind farm or near the wind farm. So, you know, it is the wrong place. It's the wrong place again. Number 5 on your list, which you might have read, the tidal flows of up to 3.5 knots in the NAVITUS area have a significant influence on sailing boats. The sideways push effect makes it very dangerous, being faced with isolated dangers. Now, you'd think that if you sail from the Needles to France or Channel Islands or the Poole, anywhere, you would go on the line of the ferry. Now that isn't the case with a sailing boat, because the sideways push is so great that you may be steering straight, but in fact, I've done it a lot of times, you'll be at least 10 miles off to the west or to the east in the duration of crossing to France. And so you can imagine that you're going actually steering straight, but you're actually going sideways. And if you had poor visibility or any mechanical problems, and you came up against one of these turbines, I can assure you a dangerous situation would be on your hands. Because if you saw it there and you tried to steer up against the tide, you'd slow down of the draft, better or worse, I don't know. You may be on a collision course that way, or if you go too fast. I can tell you, avoiding things in poor weather conditions is not easy in tidal conditions, and it's not undertaken by the people the Crown Estates who originally thought of putting it in the right place. I'm not sure it'll be taken on board by the inspectorate, and of course DEC, who will make the final decision, will be guided by somebody that doesn't have any consideration at all. But we've got to get this point across, really. It is a dangerous situation. Number 6 on your list, marine accidents continue to happen and always cause environmental damage. Well, I suppose I've harped on it already, really, but any vessel, whether it's commercial, recreational, fishing or whatever, if it suffers any mechanical failure, rigging, power loss, foul propeller or anything in that area will possibly crash into these pylons. They won't be friendly things to hit into, not like you're not going to be there having a problem on a nice day. Anybody can do it on a nice day. It's when the conditions go wrong. Yeah. And you might remember a few years ago the ship Napoli had engine failure and got into trouble in the southwest approaches. It eventually broke up. It caused lots of seabird deaths, lots of environmental damage on the beaches. It took 2 years to clear it up, and it cost £120 million to clear it up. And since then, another boat sank up the coast to the east and deposited all the timbers on the beaches up through Worthing, and as you might remember, with all the pictures on the television. That was lucky, that was timber, not oil. So any boats that are approaching there and get into trouble. Of course, there was a brand new ship with all the modern navigation equipment on. Went too close to Alderney, which is just down here, and clipped the rocks fairly recently and got into trouble. It was recovered, but even last week, a Spanish cargo ship floundered with engine trouble on the Spanish coast, I think it was, just on the French-Spanish border, and it broke in half. Luckily, it wasn't loaded with any undesirable sort of environmental problems. So the environmental damage isn't too bad. But what I'm saying really is that accidents will continue to happen, and they always have happened. So, and of course, if we do have a big spillage there, where will it end up? On Bournemouth Beach, Christchurch Beach, Swanage Beach, or down the Solent. So this NAVITUS crossroads is really in the wrong place. And I endorse you all to, if you can write letters and say anything, please do.
In a nutshell, how was the decision made to have it there? And second question, how many windmills approximately are we talking?
I didn't keep my hearing aids in today, go louder.
In a nutshell, how was the decision made to have it there? And second question, how many windmills approximately will there be for the project?
Well, the Environment Agency, Crown Estates initially allocated the area. So, because they draw ground rent on it, which is fair enough, it goes into the Treasury and keeps the Queen happy. But, and of course there is the latest proposal, it's been reduced slightly, it's 194 turbines now, which is a lot of turbines compared with we were talking about trials being done on the North Oil Farm, which was only 30 turbines. So.
Lawrence, there's just we're rapidly running out of time. If anyone's got any questions,
I just would like to say one thing really. It says at the bottom here, the last one, the effects of change to the wind and climate downwind are unknown. Now, that's an odd thing to say really. It isn't really my subject really, but I don't know if anybody's ever seen this picture really, but when big turbines mix the warm air and the cold air together, they can form a fog under certain conditions, which would be springtime. And so, you know, we don't want fog coming down on Bournemouth beaches, do we? That's a lot smaller wind farm. We don't know what will happen downwind of a large wind farm.
I think the phrase "we don't know what will happen" permeates this whole scenario, doesn't it? That's a fascinating photograph.
Yeah, is that photo available anyway on the website?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Will they be seen, well, heaven forbid they're not built, but will they be seen from the French side, and if so, are they okay with it?
We don't know. I mean, if they were built over the horizon, you're talking about roughly 16 miles. It depends on how far the coast is from the other side. I suspect probably not.
No, they wouldn't be. No, if we sail the channel, we have about 4 hours of visibility seeing the English coast if it's clear, and about 4 hours without any coast showing, and then we have about another 4 hours seeing the French coast.
Just take a last question from the gentleman.
Can I just ask Lawrence, if a sailing boat is going towards the wind farm and they're pushed into the area of the wind turbine and the propellers, and there is a swell which is lifting and lowering the boat, and the mast is what, 40 foot mast?
No, these are really large machines, and there's a clearance at height of the highest tide of 22 metres, which is quite considerable.
Okay, thank you.
Residential, recreational and fishing vessels can go into the wind farm, but commercial ships cannot enter. So it does make very dangerous pinch points where they're going around the corners.
So of all the places in Britain where they could have them, why such an inappropriate spot?
I don't know why they put
I think we'll actually have to draw it to a close now, because it's actually getting close to half. Guy, go on.
Yeah, no, just quickly, I had to leave the room, so forgive me for making this point. Remember that it's part of another strong argument against, which is the technology. I mean, technologically wise, these things are completely out of date. The fact of the matter is that MIT, Stanford are working on photocells now that are more efficient than biological plant cells. Okay, they've got. We can generate power. Now, I think last week I read something. I think it was in the Telegraph about cold fusion, and I think they cracked it to a certain extent. I mean, these things are seriously out of date. We've got new technologies emerging in the next 5 to 10 years, which make them obsolete. So it's another part of the
absolutely, no, absolutely.
Well.